What's up, guys? I'm getting set up here, so bear with me just a moment. All right. So, I didn't plan actually on doing this video just yet. I was going to wait until after we saw who the Mavericks were going to take in the first round. But there's a lot of updates, which, I guess in hindsight I should have guessed. A lot of updates going on, and as a result, that's going to kind of change the course of the draft, so I figured I'd try and get something a little more up to date out before the draft actually comes about. So, let's see here. Now, for those asking on the trade regarding Chandler Parsons and the Memphis Grizzlies, I don't think that trade is altogether dead. But I will say that I think it's at this point looking very unlikely. And the reason is, I see my video is a little laggy here. Let's see if I can help that. If I can't help that, I'll just throw a graphic up. Yeah, that's looking pretty laggy. All right, off with the camera. Well, you can hear me, so that'll work. So for those wondering regarding that Memphis Grizzlies deal, I think that's pretty much out at this point, and I think the reason for that is more teams got involved. As I mentioned earlier this morning, we got up to the point of 7 teams effectively trying for that deal, wanting that 4th pick. And then we started to hear other things as well, namely that the Grizzlies wanted to stay in the top 10 because they wanted to draft Wendell Carter, which was really one of the few guys, one of the few top-end prospects that even would come work out with them. So I think they're in a bit of a mess of a situation, but they wanted Wendell Carter, and to do that, they needed to stay, somewhere around that 9-10 at least. To do that, other teams like the Knicks have a better offer, I think, than Dallas. I'm not sure of the financial situation of everything on it. I know what was being reported here last night suggested that Dallas was one of the only teams that could financially take on the Parsons contract. And maybe that just means with limited finagling. I don't know. But regardless, I think that one is borderline dead in the water at this point. The odds of getting pick 4 and 5 in exchange for simply taking on Parsons and giving up something like Powell and Matthews or Barnes or whatever. It doesn't feel super strong, but I won't completely rule it out just yet. Now, what has been really gaining momentum, if you've been watching in the last, or listening rather, in the last hour or so, I think this was first reported on 105.3 The Fan by, let me see if I can find his name here, Zach Klein. He was on with, I think it's Spin and Skin, and they were talking about a potential trade between the Atlanta Hawks and the Dallas Mavericks. Now, for those wondering, this deal would effectively give Dallas Luka Doncic. And I like Luka. Luka's one of those 3 guys that I said I would really like. Now, he hasn't been my guy that I've most wanted, but part of that was because I felt like you could only get him if you were willing to move up, and I was afraid of what the cost would be to move up. Now, if the deal is like what we're hearing and what's been, being reported even beyond just Dallas the last hour, this still sounds like a good deal for Dallas. So we know that Ayton is pretty much locked in at 1. Bagley is pretty much locked in at 2. Atlanta, they like Doncic a lot, but they're not as high on him. They're not as sold on him because he is not a traditional athlete. And as a result, the guy that they're leaning toward drafting, taking, dealing for, whatever, is actually a guy they have obsessively watched for the past year, Oklahoma's Trae Young. Now, in addition to being a surprise, I would say, for him going a little early, this makes sense for them because they get to get some cap relief in the deal as well. Basically, what it would be is they would draft Doncic at 3, trade to Dallas, for pick 5. That would be Trae Young. And also in the deal from Atlanta would be Kent Bazemore, and from Dallas, Wes Matthews. So Dallas gets, it's one last year of Wes Matthews, but they get a big contract off their books. In exchange, they're taking on Bazemore, who, it helps the Dallas front court, but I'm not super excited about the deal. But yeah, I really think that that's what we're looking at here. And I think that's a good deal for Dallas if that's what it is. Hey, shout out Elliot in the chat. They are keeping the number 5 pick, right? So no, in this scenario, the Atlanta-Dallas trade, Dallas would not keep the number 5 pick. This would be a swapping of picks. Atlanta would get Trae Young, who we took with the 5th. We would get Luka Doncic, who they took with the 3rd. And then in addition, we give them Wes Matthews. They give us Kent Bazemore. So Dallas, we've been hearing for the past few days, Dallas really, really wants Doncic. And, we had the Woj bomb the other night when Innie and I were doing our top 10 mock draft. And that appears to be the case here. They are that serious about getting it. And as much as I loved the idea of the Memphis trade, I was trying not to let myself get too excited for it, aside from my first video in which I geeked about it. But I think that there's still a lot of good you can get out of this deal. Now, there's another thing I've heard. I've seen nothing to verify. What about us getting number 4? So number 4, I don't think is on the table anymore for Dallas. I'm not going to say it's thrown out, essentially, but there's a lot of stiff competition at this point for that Memphis number 4 pick. And the big thing is Memphis wants to stay within the top 10 so that they can still get a guy like Wendell Carter, who is one of the few top-end prospects that they really like and who was actually willing to come work out for them before the draft. So I think that that's the situation there. Like New York, for instance, probably fits perfect into that arrangement. So Dallas is going to be hard-pressed to pull that off. And I heard talk of it even around 12:30. Around that time, I was still hearing a fair bit of talk regarding that deal, but now it's kind of gone quiet, and now you're hearing about this Atlanta thing. And because of how high the Mavericks have been on Doncic for really the whole year, and especially in the last few days, I don't think this is a smokescreen. It could be, but I really don't think that that's the case. I think this is a deal that makes a lot of sense because we know that Atlanta has been obsessively watching Trae Young and, wanting to acquire him for a while. They don't want it with the 3rd pick, but they are more comfortable doing it for the 5th pick, and they also get a little bit of cap relief there, I guess. So that's what we're looking at. Shout out to @XTheGreat and Anthony Simpkins as well in the chat. Yes, Bamba is one of those players as well that I like a lot. He was one of the 3 guys I said I really wanted. I said from the start that I would be happy if we got Doncic or Porter Jr. or Bamba. Now, if we were staying at 5, my personal vote has been from the start that Porter Jr. is who I wanted. However, in this scenario where Dallas would be essentially moving to 3, Atlanta would make the pick. It would be a trade after the fact, after the pick. In that scenario, I don't hate the idea of going Doncic over Porter Jr. Bamba, I like him a lot, but I think he's probably sitting where he is. That's a good question, Anthony. Let me check the Kent Bazemore contract here. Bear with me just a moment here. The wonders of Google. Kent Bazemore, so in 2016, July 1st, 2016, he agreed to a 4-year, $70 million contract. So he's owed some money. It's not the Wes Matthews deal where I think his was 2015, and it was a 4-year, $94 million. So he's going to have 2 years left on his deal as opposed to Wes only having the 1. And he's still looking at big money as well. So interesting there. I like what he brings to the table. I don't know that he is a huge difference maker in this case, but it's not a bad pickup as far as that goes. if you got a bit piece coming back in the deal, that's not a bad one to take on. Yeah, $17.5 million a year, so he's basically making the same as Wes was on the front of his end of his deal. Usually the way these contracts are stacked is the money builds up bigger and bigger in the subsequent years, backloaded contracts, and that's usually to give the team some wiggle room. I don't know that there's a whole lot of benefit for the players other than just getting more money as the contract goes on, but usually that's how teams keep wiggle room in a deal if they want. Let's see. Yeah, Bazemore doesn't excite me a whole lot. But again, if we're talking about a bit piece here, it helps build out the front court a little better. We were a little undersized in the front court. So I think it could help there. And Wes Matthews moving that's moving a big deal off of our books. So that should help as well. The big thing here is Dallas wants Doncic that bad that they are willing to deal with a guy they feel is a real locker room leader for them that they love in Wes Matthews. Now, we can argue about, or I should say debate, about whether or not Matthews has been, what we hoped he would be. But regardless, they feel strongly about him. So if they're moving him in this deal, I would have to assume that it really signifies how badly they want Doncic. Yeah, I agree, Anthony. I think I prefer Bazemore over aging Wes Matthews. Wes is still okay. He still has his nights. He's a good defender, but I don't think he ever fully recovered from the torn Achilles. And that's, when you suffer the torn Achilles, I'm trying to remember his age at the time. He was like, I want to say 28, 29 when he did it. So it's not shocking that he's had a hard time coming back from that. The other news of the day, and there hasn't been a whole lot on this. I just was gonna sound off on it. The Mavericks' pursuit of Boogie Cousins, I'm not sold on it, man. I'm really not. And I know that you look at his talent and his production, and you think, well, why would you not want that? Well, I view it through this lens. Boogie is getting close to 30 here. DeMarcus Cousins is getting close to 30. He's a guy that wants to play for a contender. He's 27 right now, going on 28 this season in August. He doesn't want to play with a team that's far away, and Dallas isn't close right now. Why would Mom do that? Why would Mavs do it? So he's asking on the question regarding the number 4 pick, I guess. It's not that the Mavs wouldn't do that. I think it's more so that Memphis is now fielding offers that are better for them in terms of the return. As I mentioned before, Wendell Carter, they want him. A team like the Knicks, who are in those talks, and the Bulls are in there as well. But especially the Knicks, I think, could still give them that top 10 pick while also providing an additional pick on the front end of the draft, somewhere in the mid-teens as well. So it's more appeal for them. But back on the Boogie thing, you're talking about a guy that's 27 years old. He played for years with junk Sacramento. He doesn't want to come to Dallas and then not really compete again, because Dallas is like 3 maybe 4 years away from that, depending on how their continued rebuild goes. We're talking about a guy that is a coach killer, a locker room cancer, and one of his best buddies, who he's played with on 2 different teams now, Rajon Rondo, didn't have a great tenure here himself, albeit a short one. I really worry about if you have young, impressionable players like Dennis Smith Jr. and, Luka Doncic as well, but maybe not as much on that regard. But I worry that you would have a negative impact on the young players, because as soon as the team is, off to a slow start or something, somewhere around 20, 30 games, I could see him starting to become a bit of a problem, even if he could stuff the stat sheet. So, and to get him would probably require like a sign-in trade, something along the lines of, let me think. What would that deal probably require? It would probably require Dallas to trade like Harrison Barnes, Dwight Powell, Yogi Ferrell, this year's second and a first next year. Maybe throw in like a protected thing on that. But That's probably what it would require to get Boogie if you're talking to sign and trade. That's way too high of a price. And don't get me wrong, I've said before, I would almost welcome the burn it down rebuild aside from guys like Dennis Smith and someone to that effect. But I don't think this is the way to go about it because Boogie's best years are not going to be when you're ready to contend, and that's paying a ton of money. It's like taking one huge step forward now in terms of how good we can be, but then not able to keep taking big steps. So it's like you take the one giant step and then several regular steps, as opposed to just kind of keeping this slow, steady pace of balanced steps. You can go further going the more balanced route than you would just because you took a big step in the other scenario, if that makes sense. I don't know if I'm fudging that analogy at all, but I think you can go further by not acquiring Boogie. There's still other things involved that you got to keep taking the right steps, but I think you could ultimately go further if you don't acquire him right now than you could if you did. DeAndre Jordan, no, just no. There's no coming back for DeAndre in Dallas. I don't see why they would want it, because now we're talking about him being 3 years older than he was. His numbers are about the same, but I don't see any benefit for Dallas in welcoming him back. Like he pretty much shunned the entire city and organization, the fan base, all that. It's whatever, but there's no need for DeAndre Jordan back in Dallas, and I don't think he would even be welcomed even if the team did entertain the idea. Mavericks do need a big, and that is why Bamba is interesting for the people talking on like the Boogie front. And there was the report today the Mavericks believe they have strong odds to land DeMarcus Cousins in free agency this summer. How many years have we heard something to that effect regarding a big fish? I'm not interested in that talk anymore. I'm not about that talk. That's why I've been focused on the draft, and that's why I've been thinking, okay, the Memphis deal, the 4 or 5. Again, don't think that's happening anymore. But if it could have happened, great. That's where you get your guys. You get Bamba and you get Porter. In that scenario, I assumed, again, that Doncic would be gone somewhere around 2 or 3. Now it sounds like we might have a trade partner with Atlanta who can get us Doncic at 3. In return, we give them 5 with whom they want Trae Young. And then we swap Wes Matthews for Kent Bazemore. So it is what it is. I like the indication. First of all, I'm excited just that during an NBA draft, I can actually be excited about the Mavericks. There were so many years there where we had nothing going on. I mean, I didn't even cover or pay attention to them really. I would read up on it after the fact to see who they took or who they didn't take. And you had bizarre decisions as well where you don't take the Greek Freak because you want cap room to be able to go after a guy like Dwight. Yeah, that turned out great. You don't take Kawhi Leonard in the second round because you want, oh man, what is that guy's name? The Indian center who his quote-unquote highlight tape was just him dunking on a goal without really having to jump, but he's showing no fluid movement or athleticism or anything. Was it like Sala or something? I can't recall. But yeah, not feeling that. Dwight Howard on Noam Quest. Sorry if I butchered that name. Dwight, man, I don't think many teams are interested in Dwight anymore. I think that's kind of the point. Yeah, we need a lot of help. There's no doubt we need help. But here's the thing. I kind of like the idea of getting better progressively. Because if we try and build ourselves the best possible team next year, if we made a move like Boogie or to a lesser extent Dwight Howard or something like that, yeah, we might be 7-8 games better next year. But who cares? At best, you're talking about winning 46 games, being on the road in the first round, and getting your butt handed to you by either Houston or the Warriors. If we're going to do this, we need to look at the big picture and play the long game here. That's yeah, that was a misspeak earlier, by the way, on Kawhi. Point being, they need to look at this in that regard, of the big picture, and not just focus on trying to get the best team on the court they can next year. As a result of that, I think what they're doing, assuming that DeMarcus Cousins sign and trade thing isn't actually their thinking, I don't mind the price for Doncic, because I do think Dallas likes a 2-point guard system, and I do think that long term that can be a real playmaker for them. He is a phenomenal passer. He is, as I said in the show the other night, a guy who he's already played in the second best basketball league in the world. The only equivalent or something to that, not equivalent, it's better than D1 basketball. He's already played at that level, and at 19, he was already MVP, won the championship over there, was like their tournament MVP for that, their finals MVP, whatever they call it. He's already done all of that. And again, at 19, his resume is pretty much longer than my right arm. So there's a lot to like there about him from a playmaking standpoint and all of that. It's just a matter of what they can actually do with him. And I tend to think a coach like Carlisle can do a lot with him. So maybe Dallas is looking from that. I think with regard to his floor, he has the highest floor of anyone in the top few picks of the draft. And what I mean by that, I think like Michael Porter has the highest ceiling. But even if Doncic doesn't become a great player, he can still be a very good player. And that seems like a safer bet that he'll be at the very least a very good player, if not a transcendent player in the league. So that's the thinking in that regard. Dallas has been high on him for a while. We'll see if this Atlanta trade actually happens. But other than that, guys, we'll just see. I'm planning to go live again later after the Mavericks make their pick and we see what's going on. And then later tonight, if you guys are interested, I don't know how many of you are also just Dallas Cowboy fans. I got a live show later tonight as well, part of Dallas Prospect Live with Law Nation and Big Game James of Silver and Blue Nation. And we'll be talking some Cowboys news as well. That's not until 9 o'clock tonight. In the meantime, I'll be doing some more Mavs talk after we see how the NBA draft pans out for the first round. So, guys, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Check out the website, thedallasprospect.com. I've been Derek, and until next time, salute.